Sitting here in my room, safe and sound, had a little time to reflect on my job as peacekeeper at the Wildwood protest rally, which was more of a sign up, voter registration, listen to MLK the Third speak about unity, civility, some poetry, some music, a couple hundred people being introduced into some candidates that will be running against our senator who just switched parties. I've had some time to reflect about it. It's really kind of a sad state of affairs. To have people standing above you, I believe almost equal in number to those of us down below, screaming unbelievably vile, unbelievable. I can't even think of some of the things that were screamed at me. As a peacekeeper, there was about 10 or 11 of us. We kept our backs to the boardwalk where the people were. Our focus was on our people to keep them from engaging. We had a meeting the night before about how not to engage, do not give the people what they want, do not engage in any shouting matches with them. And for the most part, that is exactly what happened. The other part is, it was terrible. The things that were said bordered on crazy. Didn't make any sense to be called a baby killer and then have them wish children that were in the group should have been aborted by their parents. Makes no sense. I understand that the evangelical core of Trump's base is very anti-abortion. I'm not really for abortion. I am for a person making their own choices, whether it's from a horrible incident in their life that they'll never get over, an accident of time, a unfortunate, unwanted pregnancy foisted on them by a criminal act. I don't think that anybody has the right to make up anyone's mind, whether who you support or don't support, and I understand that it's a huge evangelical issue. I have a problem with that mainly because once a child is born, our government does very little for them. Everyone screams about welfare, they scream about giving away food stamps, they scream about everything but trying to help people, particularly young girls in a lower economic group. They're more likely to keep their children than women that have a career in mind or have the means to make that choice. I've helped many financially and with information, girls that chose to keep their babies at 16, 17, 18 without the male being involved, because in our society most men can just walk away if they choose to. But there's very little that our government actually does for the child once it's born. There's very little that the evangelicals do. They support a conservative system of keep the money away, keep the food stamps away, make them work for a living, all these things that are actually detrimental to a young woman trying to raise a child on her own, particularly if she hasn't the means to do that. Corporate welfare doesn't really come into their minds. Tax cuts for wealthy people don't come into their minds. Some of the statistics that I've seen and heard lead me to believe that if we just cut down on the giveaways to corporations and the tax breaks and the amount of money that we waste on Secret Service for everyone in the Trump family, or everyone in the government that's allowed to be reimbursed for everything. I understand that corporate welfare costs much, much more money than actual social welfare. That being said, there was no reason for any of the supporters to be screaming that children should be aborted. And it's up to the evangelicals in the party and those people that are very strident with their support of pro-life and anti-choice, really need to examine their conscience and say, okay, so fine. So what do we do for these people to give these children that we think that they should insist that we should be able to insist that they have? What happens once it does? There is a child, there is a life. There's a child being born into a situation where, in most cases, the social, economic, perhaps even the educational level of the mother doesn't really lead to the best opportunities for the child. So rather than have Trump supporters up shouting things like that at me, also a lot of vulgarity. I think that Donald Trump himself, from his stage and from his rally and his pulpits, has encouraged people to be less civil. If he can call all of his opponents names, and he can say mean things to everybody, and he can denigrate anybody that doesn't like him, and he can find some fault with everyone who doesn't support him, where he can talk about the old days where they used to beat people up and take them out in a stretcher and the like. If it's okay for our chief in charge of the country to call names and say sometimes some quite vulgar and vile things himself, then his supporters really should not be faulted for doing the same things because they're just following his lead. It's a terrible lead. We were there to protest some of the policies, not happy with what happened to the Kurds because of a tweet and perhaps some backroom deal that he made with Erdogan and Turkey and Syria, whatever will come out, because in the world of good versus evil, the light will always eventually shine on the truth, and we will know. But whatever. So I'm not happy about the Kurds. I'm not happy about children being separated from their parents at the border, especially since we so revere children that we don't want any woman to have the choice to not have a child if she becomes pregnant. It seems really like quite a ironic situation. I don't like what he's done to the encouragement of nationalism. He has said he is a nationalist. Well, nationalists are also generally white supremacists and would take their lead from that. I mean, after all, David Duke congratulated and thanked Donald Trump. Donald Trump has also said that there are some very good people on both sides. I'm sorry, in my world, in 75 years after Auschwitz and watching these, the liberation of Auschwitz, and watching all of these people and learning more and more about the horrible things that happened, and then realize that they're still happening today. We got the Rohingya, we've got the Uyghurs, we've got all kinds of girls in countries, even in countries like India, where they have a problem with men throwing acid on women. I actually am a never Trumper. I would be a never fill in the blank whoever that actually would feed the fire of misogyny, racism, incivility, bullying. It's a little ironic that Melania's be best. I think it should really not be best. And I don't really find that her anti-bullying goes too far when her husband is one of the biggest bullies that's going. I understand that he has control. I understand that voting him out is the only real method of getting him out, given the fealty and that most of his people have. Now that he's gotten rid of the best, or the best have left, so many people have left. I'm not exactly a big fan of over 180 ex-lobbyists now being people that are in his administration. I thought the swamp was supposed to be drained. I didn't know the swamp was supposed to be filled with additional alligators. But, yes, I was a Hillary. I was one of the 3 million people that voted for Hillary Clinton in excess of the folks that voted for Donald Trump. Not a problem. I am a never Trumper. I am a never liar. I am a never vulgar. I am a never anything that brings evil into the world, as opposed to a positive, open-hearted understanding of our fellow man and our charge by Christianity that I adhere to, or try to adhere to as best as I can, of treat everyone like you'd like to be treated. The way the Wildwood rally, antagonists, harassers came at us was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And the campaign rally machine of Donald Trump knows that goes on, encourages that to go on, encourages them to hate libtards and snowflakes, which apparently I'm a libtard and a snowflake, but that's okay. It needs to stop, people, and it needs to be understood by the evangelicals. They need to come to one of these rallies, protest rallies, and tell me and show me that they can control and change those words, those vulgarities, those horrible things that were said. Interestingly enough, which I found really kind of funny and reflecting on it, most of the words and the rants were used against women. Now, most of the people up on the boards were men. They were all men. One particularly young-looking kid that told me to come as a real man. I kind of turned around finally and said, "Can I have your mom's phone number? Because I just want to let her know that this old C word that he used, I did not, is here with her son, and these are the things this child is saying to me." It was not pleasant. They were not poorly mannered. They were ill-driven, hate-driven, and supported by our commander-in-chief. People should think about that. Evangelicals should think about that. Good people who are Trump people. I have friends that are Trump supporters. And they're, oh, that's awful that they said those things to you. It's awful that they did those things to you. But Donald Trump is still, no, 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 no. No, both things can't be true until and unless Donald Trump comes out and tells his people to stop calling names, and he stops calling names, and he stops bullying, and he stops wishing that people get hurt because they don't support him. He owns it. He owns it all. Evangelicals own it all. And all Trump supporters own it all. No one in our group said anything like what was said to us. And as a matter of fact, the only time we had a hard time containing our people was when they started threatening and saying horrendous things to a couple of the younger children, which were like 13 or 14 in the group, and wishing they had been aborted, and calling it, every man was called the F word for homosexuals. But for women, they reserved it all. We were called the C word, the B word. We were called and told that they would want us to do this, and they want us to do that, and they were going to do this to us, and they were going to do that, and they were going to urinate on us. Only they didn't say urinate at all. Horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. That was Wildwood. Trump campaign rally with Jeff Van Drew, and I have yet to hear a spoken word of condemnation of the people of the Trump nation that seem to feel that they are entitled to come 3 blocks away. We stayed away from them, come down 3 blocks, stand above us, and try to intimidate us with language and threats and spitting and various things. The only thing I can say is that I got my Zen that night. After a while, you just don't even distinguish what's being said to you. And you're only looking at your people to try and keep them from reacting and try and keep them from even somewhat hearing what's being said. It was unbelievable. I've been in a peacekeeping situation since decades. My first anti-what was going on rally was against Carl McIntyre when I was in 1968, when I was 14. He ranted and raved and wished that all homosexuals would, die, and condemn them to whatever. And I happen to have a gay brother, so I found myself on the front of the Philadelphia Inquirer paper, and having a quiz by, I guess it was the FBI, it was some law enforcement agency, as to why I was there. It was, again, a peaceful rally in front of a Collingswood church on Cuthbert Boulevard. I think it was 68. I know I was like 14 or 15. And I was writing and sending cookies to Vietnam while I was, questioning the governments and joining in questioning the government's reasoning for being there and sending our guys there just to die all the time. Civil rights, marched for that. Again, with Martin Luther King III was a wonderful experience, and it really reminded everybody that, as long as you can hold your head up and you don't act like they act, you have the high ground. Whether they're standing over top of you, threatening to do things to you down below, you have the moral high ground, and that's the only high ground that matters. Out. Except that I can't get out.